Hi everyone, this is Kenneth Wong here. Welcome, I'm glad you can join us today. Today we'll be talking about Myanmar Diaspora and the Milk Tea Alliance. This is about the Myanmar youth and their global activism. This is the very first speaker forum taking place during the Burma Spring Benefit Film Festival. So my name is Kenneth Wong. I am a San Francisco-based Burmese American writer, blogger, and language instructor. I'm so glad that you can join us. I'll be the moderator for today's forum. We are going to, let's meet our panelists first. So one at a time, I'm going to ask Mimika first to, Mimika, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us about what you do and who you are?
Hello, everyone. My name is Mimi. I am currently based in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. I currently go to Stanford University for my Master in International Policy. Before coming to the US for my undergrad and graduate studies, I was a student union leader from back in Yangon, and I was also a poet and activist since around 2013. So I've been organizing and working and advocating for human rights in Myanmar starting around that time and since the coup on February 1st, I've been organizing with Burmese communities that are based in the Bay Area, and I'm involved with a number of advocacy groups, student groups, and as well as the Milk Tea Alliance advocacy group with a lot of activists from around the Asia and Asia Pacific region.
All right, thank you very much. We have two Sandra, so I have to distinguish them by their last name. I'm going to call Sandra Mon first. Sandra, would you mind also doing your self-introduction and tell us about your background, please?
Sure, Kenneth, thank you. Thank you to the organizers for this, wonderful opportunity to speak. Greg, Jeannie, Hallisey, and many others come to mind in addition to Kenneth, so appreciate it. Hello, everybody. My name is Sandra Mo. I am a Myanmar national, and I am currently an infectious disease researcher specializing in health and human rights. I work at the Johns Hopkins University right now, but in a couple of months, I'll be transitioning over to start my PhD at the University of Oxford. So today I'll be speaking kind of in my professional capacity as an epidemiologist that's focused on health and human rights issues. But obviously I'm also speaking in my personal capacity as a strong-willed citizen of Myanmar. So where I come in with activism here is, well, just to preface, I'm fairly new to the activism world, but given the work that I do, I have been sort of advocating for Myanmar on the health front because beyond everything that's happening, this is all, raging in the middle of a still ongoing pandemic, which is COVID-19. So I've been working a lot on documenting and reporting the Myanmar military's attacks on healthcare and really pushing the advocacy messaging that these assaults on healthcare have wide-ranging consequences, not just in Myanmar, but regionally and potentially globally. Just really quickly before I end, I just want to say in the kind of work that I do as a health and human rights researcher, we think a lot about intersectionality and how different factors of society and identity really sort of collide to affect populations in very deep and powerful ways. And what's going on in Myanmar is really just a full encapsulation of that notion of intersectionality, where we're seeing different ethnic groups, different generations, LGBT folks, communities that have been historically just so disenfranchised and oppressed by, not just the military, but the Burma majority. Really everybody banding together and coming out and saying, we will fight this fight together and for our collective freedom. So with that, I just want to acknowledge that, today is the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. June is Pride Month. And we just came out of the Asian Pacific Heritage Month for those of us in the US. And all of these sort of movements and ideas represent the fight for freedom from oppression, from neoliberal, neocolonial, and frankly, tyrannical constructs of what society should be. And I hope to take this chance to honor all of those who fought before us so that we, myself, Mimi, Sandra, Jenja, can sit here today with Kenneth and talk about our form of activism. So looking forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you very much. The The Tiananmen Square Memorial is particularly important since we are talking about the Milk Tea Alliance, because there is a broader context beyond Burma. We are also going to meet the other Sandra Kong, Sandra K, I'm going to call her. Sandra, unfortunately, because of her internet connection, is using the connectivity reservedly. So Sandra K, would you mind introducing yourself, please, and tell us about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Apologies, my video is off. I've had spotty internet today. My name is Sandra Kong. I am one of the execs and co-founder of the Global Movement for Myanmar Democracy, along with my co-founders JUN and Frank. I am a Chinese Burmese American second gen, born and raised in Texas. And over the past couple of months have been working on not only GM4MD, but US coalition building to really inspire and mobilize a youth-led grassroots force and have raised our voices to political players that we typically are hesitant to engage in. And also on the end, build a sense of community and identity and what it means to be a second generation immigrant and navigating the challenges it means and having a hyphenated identity. So I really thank, as mentioned, Greg, Kenneth, Jeannie, all the filmmakers for hosting this wonderful series of events throughout the next week and providing a space for us to come together and express solidarity for one another.
When Sandra K came and talked to me first about her idea for a global movement for Myanmar Democracy website, I thought it was really ambitious, but I must say the website is up and running and they are doing exactly what they set out to do. So that is incredible. And I'm honored to have played a role somehow in the formation of this website, a small role if it is. Let me start with you, Mami Mikan. Today we're talking about Milk Tea Alliance, and you are one of the people who helped organize the West Coast US Milk Tea Alliance rally that was done in collaboration with a local activist group, Free Burma Action Committee. So could you maybe help us understand, how should we understand the term Milk Tea Alliance? Why is it called Milk Tea Alliance?
Yes, the term Milk Tea Alliance, it is what Milk Tea Alliance is sort of an evolving idea, but the term Milk Tea Alliance came into form as something that was coined by the online activists and activists who were fighting against the encroachment of Chinese authoritarianism in the area of Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific, and especially on Hong Kong, Taiwan, Thailand, and then now we have seen that Myanmar has become part of the very active member of the Milk Tea Alliance too, and it's a very open space. So if you look at the Milk Tea Alliance space that we're in, there are activists from Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, so sort of the entire Southeast Asia region, and then the Asia Pacific is joining to counter against. At first, it was mainly the Chinese authoritarianism, and then now it has sort of expanded into a larger, more progressive ideas of imperialism, authoritarianism, and then injustice in general. And the idea behind the milk tea is that, in Hong Kong and Taiwan, when people drink tea, they put milk in their tea, and like in mainland China where they drink the tea, it's usually the plain green and black tea. And so the idea from there is Milk Tea Alliance, sort of the signifying the something against the Chinese Communist Party and the authoritarian China. And at first it used to be for a large part of the year after the term Milk Tea Alliance was coined, it was largely an online movement. It was sort of the back and forth fight between the Twitter users and then from the mainland, and then from Taiwan, Hong Kong, and then Thailand and other part of Asia Pacific. But now it has sort of marched into a more in-person protest organizers and in-person protests as well. As you see, we have had Milk Tea Alliance rally in New York, DC, and then San Francisco and LA, and in around Asia too. Whenever protests are happening, all of us are sort of coordinating with each other, sharing tactics, sharing ideas. The Milk Tea Alliance as a space represented have, you see that even on Twitter, there are now multiple Milk Alliance accounts, like even for Burma alone, there are multiple Milk Alliance, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. And all of them are sort of sharing their tactics and sharing information each other, sharing to promote each other's protests. For instance, the protests that happened in Jakarta when Myanmar Line was going to Jakarta for ASEAN Summit, like a lot of that was coordinated among the Milk Alliance member. They are now sending out letters as a larger Milk Alliance space. It has marched into many webinars and panels between many Milk Alliance activists. So it has sort of evolved into a larger organizing movement. Organizers throughout Milk Alliance are coming together, and they have now welcomed even other activists from other parts of the world, from Colombia and Palestine especially. And so that has sort of become a larger movement for more progressive ideas, and then largely again authoritarianism, imperialism, and struggle for liberation.
In that sense, Myanmar symbolically fits in quite nicely, because when we drink our Myanmar tea, lapeye, we actually put a lot of milk. In fact, it's not even milk, it's condensed milk that is really sweet. We have the panelist Jen joining us. Jen, if you can turn on your video, would you mind doing your self-introduction? We have all done our self-introduction, so perhaps you can do that now. Jen, are you able to hear us or respond to us? It may be that she still needs to work out our video issue, so we'll come back to her. We'll come back to her a little bit. Now that we're talking about Milk Tea Alliance, let's hear how each of your own brand of activism fits into the Milk Tea Alliance. So Sandra Mon, would you mind start saying just a little bit about how your activism fits into Milk Tea Alliance aspirations?
Sure. So like I mentioned earlier, my focus is really on the health front, health and human rights. And, when you're thinking about health for populations, it transcends, politics, ideally. It transcends national boundaries. So, when we are preserving the health of a community, we're looking across regions, and that's where like Myanmar's health issues could affect regional partners in ASEAN and across the Milk Tea Alliance, and really, like, especially with COVID, we're seeing a lot of overlap in the same issues that we're facing right now. It's the issue of vaccine equality. So, bringing attention to the health issues facing Myanmar is kind of, I'm trying to say that it's something that other folks in the nations that Milk Tea Alliance protesters belong to need to be wary of as well. I'm talking about the attacks on human rights or the attacks on health in Myanmar, and how our doctors are being silenced for participating in the civil disobedience movement that has echoes in other Milk Tea Alliance, our siblings countries, where prominent players in their protest movements have also been silenced. And there's a lot of sort of that same line of thought that echoes throughout all of our activism. And I'm bringing in the idea that, our health needs to be preserved in at the same time, because COVID is still an issue that plagues the world. So that's how I feel, I am forming cross-cutting and cross-national contributions within the Milk Tea Alliance. And we're also seeing a lot of young doctors, young medical students, medical professionals getting involved in all of this through, the generational crowds. So I think that's where a lot of pickup is coming from for my particular brand of activism.
One follow-up then, Sandra M. because of the civil disobedience movement, and it is initiated, as I remember correctly, by the medical sector first. So now the unfortunate effect of that is that the healthcare system in the country is almost at the point of collapsing. What's your concern about the Myanmar population, the most vulnerable working class people who would not normally have access to vaccine? And how do you worry that that might have spillover effects to neighboring countries in the multi-alliance?
For sure, and that is kind of the crux of my, advocacy messaging, that what's happening in Myanmar, hashtag, is not just Myanmar's problem, it's the regional, it's an international problem. The working class, it's a huge concern because public hospitals have been occupied by the military kind of in retaliation to public sector doctors participating in CDM. So you're cutting off health facilities for people who still need them. And they're not going to health facilities, one, because they don't want to support the military, but two, because by these facilities being occupied by military personnel or military affiliated people, they're worried that they will be detained or abducted or arrested at these facilities. So, it's a huge network of healthcare provision that's being cut off by the military deliberately. So, beyond just COVID, we're thinking of chronic illnesses. We're thinking of things like malaria, which I used to work in malaria research. Like drug-resistant malaria is a huge problem in Southeast Asia, and a lot of it comes out through Myanmar. So disease surveillance is under threat. If there were variants that pop up in the region, it could easily spread through Myanmar because it's not being detected. We're still amidst a global health crisis with COVID, but then there are all these other underlying factors that still need medical attention, and the threatening, the intimidation of the medical professionals in Myanmar is effectively cutting off care to an entire community and driving the medical sector into the shadows. And the impunity with which the Myanmar military has committed these atrocities should move global governments to action, because we're seeing this, in Syria, we're seeing this in Gaza. In 2021, the attacks on healthcare, there have been more reports of attacks against health workers in Myanmar than anywhere else on earth. And we do not want that to, spill over into other countries where there are similar authoritarian governments.
So I'd like to welcome our final panelist, Jen, who is finally able to join us on video. Welcome. We have done our self-introductions, but Jen, this is the right moment. Perhaps you can tell us about your brand of activism and how it fits into the overall larger aspirations of the Milk Tea Alliance, Jen.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me here. My name is JUN, and I'm in Team Form D with Sandra here, my co-founder, and I also serve as an executive for that. And the way I'm contributing to this entire movement at hand globally is pretty much like building up the grassroots power that's like extending across all these different regions around the globe, not only in the United States where I am, but also in Southeast Asian nations, where the Milk Tea Alliance has been a huge critical player and is stemming from, and then also reaching out to people in Europe and even Australia, so all of these majority Western countries, I would say, plus some Asian countries, that's where we're mostly focusing on. And we've kind of been able to build up this network of grassroots leaders in a sense, and also like protest organizers from all these different regions. So it's really been such a crazy journey, but at the same time, really amazing that there's so much solidarity, and like so much passion coming from all these different individuals, no matter what background they're from, Burmese or not, ethnic person or not, like everyone's just coming together. And that's, I guess, how I'm kind of contributing to this movement by leading Team Form D alongside Sandra and our other co-founder, Frank, who's not on this call, but yeah, like we're also youth-led. So that's another way that we're leading. And hopefully in the future, we're also like in the process still, of connecting with those on the ground as well, the Gen Z leaders up there.
Very good. Mami Mika, how about you? How do you feel like your brand of activism, what you are doing from overseas, how does it fit into the Milk Tea Alliance overall aspirations?
To me, because I've been involved in the activism even before I came to the US, I have a huge network of activists who are in the country, who are staying in the student unions, who have been leading on the full front. So when the coup began, I was sort of included in the loop of what was happening and tactic sharings among each other and among different activists. And you probably may have seen the Hong Kong activists sharing of tactics to the Burmese protester. And you also see that in a lot of the Milk Tea Alliance space because the CSO leaders and activists are connected. So they were especially early days of the movement when activists in the ground really needed many of the help, like many of the people needed Thai SIM cards or needed to top up their phone and needed to top up their Thai SIM card or any other sort of really important tactical needs, or it could be that they needed to start a Facebook page, but they didn't want to have any kind of trace back to them. So then managing a lot of those from outside the country, because the internet footprint is a lot less risk for me and a lot of my friends who are outside the country. So that's sort of where I came in and just trying to help them find different places if they are running, and trying to get that connection and network from behind was really crucial within the first few months of the coup. So that was where I mainly worked in. And now with the repression and with the crackdown, a lot of them has led to the ethnically liberated areas. So now a lot of them has come back online as well. So just talking through about, for instance, pushing the NUG internally in terms of internet advocacy, what the CSOs are doing. So a lot of that conversation is going in as well, and I'm sort of got involved. And obviously the diaspora, they are multiple diaspora activist group, and getting connected with them for, say, the global Myanmar Spring Revolution or any other kind of global coordinated effort. That is also where I came in. So I'm in just numerous different places in advocacy, and meeting with people so that to get the message across from the Burmese community, especially the message of those who are on the ground, who are stay fighting on the ground, especially the student unions, because I have a huge I would say attachment to the student union movement itself, because of how sacred and how important the student unions are, and how important student union leaders are. And so I try to amplify a lot of their messages. And one of the campaign that I just really think is so important is boycotting the military education at the moment. And I have spoken out on military educations way before, even before the coup, of how deteriorated the system is. And now that it is back to, from improving to it's now back to the old system again. I really have really strong feeling about where that is going to go, and to encourage people to sort of boycott that system. So that's sort of where I come in, and amplifying a lot of student leaders' voices, and making sure that there are also students, international students like myself in the US, and making sure that their voices are heard, and making sure that they are connected with each other. So that's sort of where I came in terms of both Milk Tea Alliance and then my brand of activism.
All right, to the audience who are watching us, we welcome your question, by the way. And in fact, we have some room after our own discussion. We plan to take your questions. So if you have questions, feel free to type them in, and we have a way to see them, and we'll address them in a few moments. But right now, I want to talk about the ASEAN regional group. Right now, as many of us know, ASEAN is sending some representative into Myanmar, hopefully to negotiate to a peaceful resolution of this crisis. But to be frank with you, many of my activist friends are very skeptical about ASEAN's ability to do something like that. So what do you think? Do you think something like the Milk Tea Alliance, with its collective will and collective force, can pressure a regional group like ASEAN to do what they are normally reluctant to do the right thing. So who would like to take this on? Who would like to make a comment on that? What do you think? Senator
I'll
Mon?
just jump in really quickly.
Yeah.
I think, I see the Milk Tea Alliance as like a very active, young, dynamic group of civil society representatives. And
Right.
that's where ASEAN, has one of its biggest strengths. The role and the power of civil society in ASEAN has really galvanized and represented community voices for decades. So Milk Tea Alliance is really just the next iteration of that extends beyond just the immediate ASEAN conglomerate. So, kind of embodying that civil society role and like Mimi just described, like amplifying the voices from community is really, the fitting nature or like fitting role that Milk Tea Alliance has should take, and it has been taking that. I think, I'm a bit of an optimist. I don't know if it's naivete or optimism, but we'll let people judge for themselves. But I think ASEAN is able to do something if certain folks are engaged. So going beyond the non-interference policy, like really focusing on the human rights issues, the humanitarian issues, the health issues, and having civil society, having folks from within the Milk Tea Alliance say, what's happening in your country, as in Myanmar, is going to affect us directly, and lobbying their governments to act from the ground up, the grassroots. This is where Sandra, Kay, and Jenja are really crucial here because they have connections to the young grassroots networks. So yeah, it's society. I mean, Milk Tea Alliance is representative of society in ASEAN.
Sandra Kay and Jinjan, you have done quite a number of lobbying initiatives that are targeting at, for example, US Congress and US senators to pass certain bills and things like that, and you have been quite successful. Have you ever thought about maybe actually lobbying at the Milk Tea Alliance level, at the regional level, to get ASEAN to do something? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because I think we definitely have thought about it before. We've discussed it. Lobbying Congress is, of course, different than lobbying another entity, though, of course, outside of the United States. So that's where we see some of the challenges, I would say. We definitely did, at the very beginning of the formation of GFORMD, try to lobby the United Nations Security Council by petitions, collecting as many signatures as possible. Basically, what we did was we took these two petitions that were like out, released by civil society organizations on the ground, and we just did it out of kind of like this just this need, to just do something. Like we were desperate, so we didn't really analyze much, about anything in the very beginning. And when we did that, we actually were able to galvanize a lot of people, get a lot of petitions, signatures on there, and it amounted to up to 10,000, and which was our goal. So we were like, yay, that's awesome. So we got our goal, but then at the same time, as we were collecting those signatures, we were meeting with other mentors. And this was at the very beginning, in February when the coup was just like new and happening. And as we talked more and more with these mentors, we realized that, even like what was being asked in those petition letters were not really realistic. And so that just, to tie it back to, ASEAN, like trying to lobby with the Milk Tea Alliance level, I feel like there are definitely limitations, as some of these countries within ASEAN are authoritarian themselves. For example, we have colleagues in Singapore, who can't really say much or do much, much less even hold a protest, it's just against the law, it's illegal there. So what can we do in those kind of circumstances when you're not even allowed to do such things, that we are able to do in America and we take for granted? It's really something that we kind of always have to maneuver through and just really strategize about. And that's also still something that we're in the process of doing at the moment. I don't think that we're really targeting ASEAN as much in our advocacy work. Although we do think a lot from a global perspective, we feel that whatever targets we're going to be pushing for, it's going to be targets that we know we can hit, So when it comes with ASEAN, like because things are a little bit contentious and unsure, we kind of maybe not necessarily stray away from it. We definitely do keep an eye on what's happening there, but we always make sure to assess what's a real outcome. Is it worth the effort? Is it worth the energy to be taking, the time? We also have to take a lot of these things into account when we're doing advocacy work, because we want to make sure that we also don't get burnout at the same time, and then make sure that whatever energy we're putting on and whatever focus we're putting on is going to be like having an actual outcome at the end. So that's where we're at, I guess. If Sandra would like to add it too, I'd like to open the floor.
Yeah, Sandra K, you've been a little bit quiet, so we'd like to hear your voice. What are your thoughts? Sandra K, you might be a little bit too quiet. Perhaps you're forgotten that you're on mute, but we will come back to you, so you can't get away with it without saying anything. But by the way, to the audience who are listening and watching us, we'd like to hear your thoughts on ASEAN Group 2. Say if all the young people can pull together their resources and their activist energy in the multi-alliance context, and if we were to pressure ASEAN for something for Myanmar, what do you think we should be lobbying for? What do you think we should be asking for? For example, should we ask for arms embargo? Should we ask for a better representative to help negotiate, whatever that might be? Mimi Khan, you want to say something?
Yes. I wanted to say something about like the MICT alliance and the idea of just lobbying ASEAN in general. You probably may have seen the MICT alliance did send a open letter to ASEAN in the early on, and I mean, like I said, the MICT alliance before, it is a people-to-people solidarity movement. It is a movement that is supposed to empower organizers and protest organizers, and essentially a liberation struggle. So the idea of just the institution of the international order, like the ASEAN and the United Nations, or the U.S. lobbying the U.S. government itself, even though there may be some necessity to it, like the whole struggle, the MICT alliance is far beyond that. It is representative of the liberation struggle, and in turn, like even the open letter to the ASEAN, it was supposed to be something of a nature of naming and shaming rather than lobbying them to do something because we think they are going to help. I think the way I see it, the evolution of the movement is such that the young people in the MICT alliance region, the young people see these structure and layers of oppression in these institutions, and see it beyond that, and see the power in the communities, and like helping each other and sharing tactics among each other, so that we can have community-based leadership and community-based transformative social movement, rather than having any kind of change from like the US or like the top down, or the ASEAN or the UN. So I just wanted to add that in there, that the activists and the people who are leading these movements in this MICT alliance space are very aware of the layers of US imperialism, for instance, or the authoritarianism in the ASEAN, and they try to see the solidarity among sort of brother and sister in the people-to-people leadership, and just wanted to add that in there.
Wonderful. Good point. Good point. Jen, Sandra has told us that her Wi-Fi is a little bit spotty, so we're going to leave her alone for now until her Wi-Fi is stable. So that's up to you, Jen, to talk about GM4MD. It seems like when you form that website, you somehow are able to recruit various generations of activists. So we may have 88 generation activists that have experienced the previous military regime's brutality and have experienced being in the jungle and as a refugee transitioning here. And you also have recruited the new Gen Z with their energy and their tech savviness. Could you talk about what is it like to bridge those two generations? Do they each have their own strengths and weaknesses? What's your observation?
Oh, absolutely. I would just say that there's definitely big differences, as you can already tell, age gap, right? And just like tech savviness, you named it already, there's all these things going on. But then not only that, I would say on top of that, we've also been experiencing a different different attitudes, you know, like when we're meeting with older generations, we always have to, of course, you know, in our Asian culture, there's always a sense of deference and respect for our elderly, right? And so when we come into these spaces as new people, I've only been in this space, advocacy space for 3 years, you know, and that was also a little bit, you know, 2 years before the coup, and then now it's like my 3rd year kind of. But even then, you know, like as a newbie, we're still newbies, you know, to all these older generation persons, especially activists who've been in this space for decades, you know, way before we were born. So when we kind of come into these spaces and insert ourselves, it may seem like we're a little bit intrusive at times, or we may also come off as a little bit like know-it-alls, maybe, I don't know. But, you know, and it's kind of something that we also are mindful of, and we also make sure that we're always inclusive. So we make sure that we don't come off as that, you know, and we don't rub them off the wrong way. There are also definitely a lot of other aunties and uncles in the advocacy space who are just so welcoming and embracing of us, and they love the leadership that, you know, Gen Z is displaying. So for those people, like, no problem at all. But yeah, either way, we're always mindful of the way that we present ourselves. It's always going to have to be a minute of respect for sure, and never coming off as, oh, you know, we're here and we're going to dominate. No, none of that, you know. And I guess to really just answer your question about the similarities, then the similarities I see despite these differences is that the 88 generation and Myanmar youth Gen Z activists are all in it to win it, you know. For the most part, I see that, you know, they're willing to collaborate even despite these differences. GMFormD ourselves is like a very multi-generational organization. We have lots of people who I would consider my aunties and uncles. I call it amat, you know, and stuff like that. So it's a whole family, you know. It really is like a family affair now. Like we have a GMFormD fam going on. We have some members who are like the same age as myself, or maybe even younger. And it's really nice to see how when you have a common goal and a common cause to work for, those differences become so tiny. Like, it doesn't even have to matter anymore that you're this age or that age, you know. Everyone has always these kind of skill sets to offer, no matter what age you are, you know. Even if you're that young, like, or, you know, you feel like you're inexperienced, there's so many other ways that you can still contribute by building up a website. For example, most of our website team designers and like even design team, you know, they're all like young people. And then we also have older people who are still on our social media team who can still do postings, you know, for our content and maintain the pages. And then we also have like older people who can still contribute by having just that wisdom and knowledge of being in the advocacy space for so long, you know. So like lending all these different types of knowledge, experiences, tech savvy stuff, you know, like it just all comes together in such a way, like a food, you know, like mixing together like soup, you know, and it's just like so beautiful. It blends all together so well. So yeah, like that's where I see the similarities going on. And the differences, of course, would be identity. For myself, you know, I'm, you know, Kachin American. I was born and raised here in America, never born in Burma. So that's where I would see like a difference. And yeah, there's always like, you know, different levels of language, I would say like expertise, you know, and barriers to that maybe sometimes, but we always manage to go through that because everyone for the most part in the advocacy space knows how to speak English, like the older people too. So no problem with that really. What else for differences? I would say differences would be the way we approach advocacy sometimes. Like the more traditional people, I want to call them traditional Burmese people, I guess, they sometimes may not be as familiar with like what asks we are making within the advocacy space. So for example, right now there's this thing called like the 3 C's, which is cutting the cash, cutting the weapons, cutting the impunity, right? And the way that we get to the goals that we want to achieve are sometimes viewed differently. So sometimes we might see ourselves, you know, maybe negotiating a bit, you know, and trying to explain ourselves, explain our methods, our ways, our tactics, our strategies to getting towards a goal that we want to get to. And then last but not least, I would say that sometimes we do find ourselves in spaces where there is still that traditional racist mindset, you know, which is unfortunate, but we also are very understanding that it's because of all the years of education that were taken away from these older people, you know, like it wasn't their fault either, you know, the 88 generation happened during their time. And now again, you know, we see another repetition of what's happening back then, where a lot of young adults now are also going to be stripped away of so many years of education, who knows how much, right? So there's that going on. And yeah, some attitudes just with like a little bit of Burman chauvinism maybe. And so yeah, just dealing with all these little things coming together, you know, and it's still nice at the end of the day to see that everyone is still growing, no matter what age you are. Just because you're old doesn't mean that you have stopped growing yet. So a lot of people are still getting used to, just really opening up their minds, and being more embracing of other cultures, learning more too. Like even within our own GFMD organization, I have a auntie who's like, I call her auntie. She's our chair for our people and culture team. And she herself is really fascinated and amazed by all the different people she's encountering within the advocacy space. Like I'm probably the first kitchen person she's met. And so she's always asking like, oh, what's your culture like? And she's really interested in learning more about like what Karen people are like, or Kia people, etc. So it's really cool to see that even adults are learning the same way that young people are.
You're describing transgenerational activism as if it is a Nanji Tok or something with a mix of everything.
Exactly.
Which makes me hungry because it's almost dinner time now, but we'll go on a little bit. I'm also thinking about the different, by the way, you may have already answered one of the audience questions. Zominkan wanted to know how to bridge the two different generations and their different outlooks. We might come back to that, so keep that in your thought, maybe to comment on it later. But right now, I want to talk about the different kind of activism venues that are available to us as overseas Myanmar activists. What do you think you are better positioned to do? Some of the things that your brothers and sisters in the country couldn't do because they're dealing with sniper fires and live ammunitions, and we can do some of the things. Although maybe there are some things that they could do better because they are on the ground and we're 8,000 miles away. So let me take turn and go around each of you. Can I start with you, Mami Mika? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, in terms of what our brothers and sisters in the country can do a lot more, organizing, on ground organizing and resisting on the ground and keeping that fire going, that's something that none of us that are outside of the country can do. We can protest, obviously, we organize protests. You also know we organize protests here in the Bay Area, and a lot of us who are in diaspora organize protests around the world, but none of that has the same pressure as those who are in the country are pressuring the government on the ground. And you see that a lot of the people on the ground are coming out to protest and resistant and civil resistant, armed resistant, however they see fit. And that is going to be something that will keep the pressure going. The civil disobedience is obviously the most important thing that our brothers and sisters back home can do. Is something that we have almost no power to do that. Like without those who are resistant on the ground, without those who are participating in CDM, our advocacy networks are almost close to nothing. And so that resistance is really the most important part. And what we can do as activists that are outside of the country, who are in the diaspora, what we can do is to support that CDM networks and support the civil disobedience financially and otherwise. A lot of the protests that we hold outside of the country are helpful in terms of our advocacy, and also in terms of keeping that spirit up in the for those who are on the ground. So what we can do the best is the support, to center their voices, to amplify their voices, to support them in whatever way they can, in whatever form of resistance they choose to go about. Because without that pressure, a lot of the work we do is going to be not as effective as the one that resistance is going strong on the ground. So I think that is something that I would say. And obviously support for CDM, the fundraising is something that diaspora can do really, really strongly. And a lot of the communities are doing it, and which is really impressive and empowering. But that's something that we will have to keep going, and obviously screaming louder so that we can amplify those who are on the ground, the voices.
Talking about fundraising, this is what we are doing. In fact, this film festival is, in fact, one of the efforts to raise funds. So if you can't, we certainly do not mean to turn anybody away for the amount that they donate. But if you can make the donation, we promise you that we will work to get those funds to the grassroots organizations that are helping people who are engaging in the peaceful, nonviolent protest against the military junta. So I'm going to come to you, Sandra Mon. What do you think? What are you better positioned to do than your brothers and sisters back home, or vice versa?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. You know, I don't know if I mentioned, but I was not very comfortable with activism just because I did grow up under a very cautious, you know, upbringing with regards to the Myanmar government and, you know, what you can and cannot say. So I went through a bit of a self-reckoning when I decided to speak up on this issue. And I did so because I realized my position as a public health professional, as someone from Myanmar, and someone who knows the system, the health system well. You know, at the end of the day, I will say, this is my soapbox, public health is inherently colonial. The way, you know, with Myanmar, especially being in the tropics, tropical hygiene was created not to protect the people from the tropics, but to protect the colonizers that entered the tropics. So, you know, there's always that savior mentality when it comes to public health, especially when it's applied to people like from Myanmar. So right off the bat, I knew I had the capacity to speak up. I knew some of, you know, I'm familiar with some of the dynamics around health and human rights. And my goal is to amplify the voices of those on the ground, medics on the ground. You know, in the work that I do, reporting on attacks on healthcare, we make sure we source our information from people who are on the ground providing medical care on the front lines, so that our information is both accurate but also impactful. We're not speaking on behalf of them. We're speaking, you know, as their megaphone. So in that sense, I think, you know, my position is, you know, perfectly in the middle of here and there in Myanmar. I think personally, you know, the challenges of doing all of this overseas is that sometimes information takes a little longer to get through, or there are security risks and people kind of go MIA for a little bit. So you have to be patient. But that's better than being on the ground and actually being actively threatened for your activism and for speaking out. And then again, you know, I saw there was a question about, you know, the hopefulness of ASEAN. I think health and human rights are fields that sort of transcend some of these politics. So, you know, in my position as a public health professional, I hope to really press some of these challenging governmental systems by really bringing to the forefront the issue of, say, COVID, you know, the health security threat, or the issue of migration of refugees that face some of these countries if they don't act. So it's a little roundabout way of lighting a fire under their behinds. So yeah, I think, you know, it's a unique position and I'm happy to be in it, but I realize that, you know, not everybody is able to speak out. So that's why I'm taking the risk.
Sandra K, I wonder if you are in a better position to use your Wi-Fi. If it is so, would you give us your voice and tell us about what is it that you feel you're better positioned to do than your brothers and sisters back home?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Great,
Yes.
sorry, it's been in and out. Could you
No
repeat
problem.
one more time?
Yes, we're all talking about some of the things that we are better positioned to do than our brothers and sisters in Myanmar because we are overseas and we live in the countries that are more democratic and we have civil rights and things like that. So what do you feel you are better positioned to do, and what do you feel they are better positioned to do?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. And I've been thinking a lot about like where my role today is as not just an activist, but as someone who has family in Myanmar, but has grown up in the US. And for now, I kind of want to go back to what I touched upon about forming identity. What I've seen a lot along even my family members as Myanmar Americans and being second generation is that we're increasingly out of touch with our culture. And so even before we can get to the point of mobilizing grassroots force and getting youth and older activists to raise their voices, they need to understand what their voices mean. And so understanding what it means to be someone who's tied to Myanmar, even though you're not born there and you do have parents who are from there, but haven't had the same experience as those on the ground. And so I think that's one way in which both of these ends come together really well and need to in this time. And understanding for me as Chinese Burmese, how do I really uphold that identity and how is that authentic and true to myself? And I've really learned that a lot in the past couple of months by being part of JUN Forum, meeting youth all across the US and abroad, and how they form their identity, whether it be through the shared experiences we have and the struggles, whether it's simply with food and culture. I bond a lot with other activists over food. And also when I worked myself in Myanmar, I felt very out of place, but seeing how we can still connect in these shared experiences is really important. And so when we are in a place where we have a lot of leverage and have a space to speak our voices where you may not be able to in other countries abroad, I do like very much emphasize the importance of using that power, but also I understand the challenges of doing so when you don't really have a sense of what that voice is. So that's where I think all together, I don't think it's one versus other that's more important, but in working together, we can really leverage that power we have in a democratic state.
To the audience who are watching us, if you find this particular conversation interesting, I'm sure that tomorrow's speaker forum will also be of interest to you, because it's very much in the same theme. Tomorrow's speaker forum is Women Leaders in the Global Movement for Human Rights, and it'll be moderated by my good friend and filmmaker, Jeannie Marie Hallisey. We're gonna come back to our conversation here and spend the last 10 minutes maybe talking about some of the comments that came up from the audience. Does anybody have, what are your thoughts on the idea that Matthew proposed? Matthew, one of the audience members, was saying that maybe we actually, rather than pressure ASEAN, we work around it or we bypass it. Is that a good idea? Do you think it's much better to pressure ASEAN to do something we want it to do? Anybody want to talk about that? Jen, you seem to have some thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for reading my face. Yeah, absolutely. Like, so I feel like from what I said earlier, it may make the audience think that we do work around it, but I forgot to mention one thing is that we don't necessarily work around it because we work indirectly, let's say that, because if we were to pressure ASEAN, we do that through Congress. You know, as me speaking as a United States person, sure. We can do that by pressuring our own congressional offices, representatives, senators included, and ask them to push anyone else up above, you know, at the upper level to push the ASEAN, you know, so it's like a domino effect. You push one thing, that thing will push the other, and then that thing will eventually push the ultimate thing that you wanted to push in the beginning. So for me as an American citizen, I can't necessarily go to ASEAN and be like, hey, you know, and knock on their door and be like, I want this, because I'm not from ASEAN, you know. But let's say you were an ASEAN person, again, like Singapore, I always refer to that because I have a good friend who's always like just, you know, kind of really frustrated with the fact that she can't do that, you know, even though she's in ASEAN herself. But other countries for sure can definitely still do that and, you know, pressure their own people in democratic societies like Korea and Japan and probably elsewhere. So yeah, that's where they can really have a lot of power in their voice. So yeah, with ASEAN, it's again very tricky. I know it seems like, oh, it's frustrating in itself to not be able to actually, like, you know, punch them directly. So yeah, that's where it is.
Punching is not what I would recommend, by
Yeah.
However, I see your point because
Yeah.
I think ASEAN does listen to, for example, when the Biden administration says something, or when the Biden administration makes noises saying that they rely on ASEAN to do something, it has effect. I can see that. So I think your point is very well made. This is the last thing I wanted to talk to you about. We have, for example, in our own activist world, Minko Nine from the 88 generation is a prominent figure. If you look at the Milti Alliance, you have somebody like, Joshua Wong as the prominent figure. Do you see them as similar figures? Do you feel, are there differences that you notice between the two of them? Maybe personality or maybe their position in what they can do and what they cannot do? Let me start with you, Mimika, and then I'll go around.
It's definitely, I think it's a tricky question to answer, right? Minko Nai, of course, was a strong student leader from the 88 generation. And then Joshua Wong, on the other hand, was a Hong Kong activist who has galvanized really large movement in Hong Kong. I think the difference, obviously, as we can all see, is the generation gap is definitely a different one. And Joshua Wong is a lot more active and a lot more involved in like the global scene of activism and globally in U.S. advocacy or otherwise than the Minko Nai. And one thing that I would differentiate personally is that Minko Nai is purely an activist, and he have made personal choices not to get involved in political position and politically. And that's the main difference. Joshua Wong, on the other hand, has formed a political party. He led, along with Nathan Law, the Demosisto. And so that will be one big thing that I would differentiate, because Minko Nai is an artist. He write poetry. He has done a lot of art, and he has chosen to do just that. After we have transitioned into the quasi-democracy, he chose not to take political leadership or any sort of the political position afterwards, and only now he has come back to the scene and galvanized. I mean, both of them could galvanize the entire a lot of people and get back behind a lot of student movement, and both of them are student leaders too, and they have come out of student movement too, and those are also similarity. But I think one thing that I have retained respect for Minko Nai a lot was not being purely activist and being an artist and having that going forward. And then but Joshua Wong, on the other hand, has tried to has involved in politics and also involved a lot more with global politics and advocacy.
I rather feel sad for Minko Nai because I get the feeling that if it was a peaceful situation, he'd just like to be painting watercolors and oil paintings and writing poetry and not get involved with politics. Unfortunately, it seems like history has called upon him again. Sandra Mon and Jen Jen, do you have anything to say about that? The difference between those two iconic figures? What are your thoughts?
I do have something to say, and I think the way they're similar is they're very charismatic, very sort of, they know how to pull a room together and really, galvanize people for their cause. And I really respect that about both of them. And I don't know each of them too well to really say how they're different. But I do want to say that in both cases, especially with what Mimi just said about Minko Nai, taking a step back from politics, and really like that's where he is, he stands out among, all these other sort of political figures or like student activist leaders. I think that's a huge learning, something that we should all learn from, which is the over-reliance on one person and one idolization of one person will always lead to some sort of downfall. And that's why the Spring Revolution has been so amazing, because, we're seeing all these student leaders coming out, they're being picked apart, they're being picked off the streets. Wei Monai has been detained, but, Go Dezansan has come out and said, it's fine, if one of us gets taken, there's gonna be another one that comes out. And, that's hugely inspirational. And that's where like Milk Alliance, for example, has been so powerful, because it's a decentralized movement for, transnational liberation from these neo-colonial, neoliberal concepts. So yeah, I mean, that's just kind of like my little aside, but they're both hugely influential. And I think, we should learn from them from a historical perspective. Joshua obviously is much more recent, but we should also learn from the decentralized movement that we're seeing across Myanmar and across the Milk Tea Alliance nations.
Jen, Alan, one of the audience members, wants to know, how could people support what it is that you and Sandra are doing? Would you like to say some things about that? How could people support GM4MD? How could they get involved? What should they do?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm glad that person asked.
Yeah.
We did previously have some applications open on our website for volunteers to join. However, we've kind of closed them for a while now, just so we can better maintain the group that we already have and make sure that everyone's on board with the same page. It takes a while, to really form and develop the team that you have. So while we're focusing on that, we still do invite everyone to follow our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We even have a TikTok. So it's at GM4MD for TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Global Movement for Myanmar Democracy on Facebook. The way that you can help and participate in our global campaigns is simply by seeing the posts that we are going to come out with. For now, we're on a short hiatus, but we'll definitely be coming back where, we might have monthly global campaigns going on. That's also another thing I forgot to mention earlier in this panel. That's how we function. We have global campaigns, and we also support our partners' global campaigns. So currently right now, we have Mimi Kant leading with the Three Fingers campaign, which is a campaign that's focusing on, the persecution of poets. And then we also have another partner campaign going on by our partner Brianna Randall and Pew Panu Kin, I believe that's her name. And they're both leading the lipstick campaign, which is supposed to draw attention to the, sexual violence against women, and it's going to be on the 19th specifically. So for that day, they're prepping, and they've already gotten submissions. The last day for that is tomorrow, by the way. I'm just giving a little spiel for them now. But yeah, these are ways that you can definitely, just participate and show up, really just even by a simple selfie. It could be that by that, we even previously had our own global campaign where we were wearing blue for the political prisoners, and so yeah, just participating by submitting your own poetry for the one that Mimi Kant is leading now, and or sending in a picture. We also have this other one, kind of forgetting it off the top of my head, but there's plenty of opportunities, I tell you, to get involved in whatever ways you want to, whether it be by art, singing, pictures, anything else.
I think
that's it.
I think I can participate in almost everything, but the lipstick campaign, I might have to figure out a creative way to support it somehow. By the way, before I thank the audience and close this event, I felt like because of the internet problem, Sandra K didn't get to say very much. So I'm going to give Sandra K the penultimate words before I say thank you and close it out. Sandra K, your words, your final thoughts.
Thank you so much, Kenneth, for offering that space to close. Yes, I just want to say that over the past few months, we've come together in newfound ways globally through different social areas. And I just want to express my solidarity and proud and achievements for all the wonderful women that I've been able to work with over the past couple of months. I think working in this advocacy space, it's really important to find mentors and find people to trust. And I really have found that among these groups of people that I'm working with right now, so Sandra, Mimi, and Chen, and also all the members of GM4MD. But beyond that, I hope that this is showing how there really is a newfound movement and momentum to really come together, come across differences, and showing to the international community that we aren't giving up this fight and that we are here for the long run. And so we hope that hearing our voices here today, and as you will throughout the next week from all of our wonderful speakers that the Spring Film Festival is hosting, that you'll feel the inspiration too, and that as the world is, overcoming new barriers each day, and new events around the world are shaking us, that we hope that we can express our own solidarity for your troubles and issues as well. So again, I want to thank you, Kenneth, and Craig and Max for helping host this wonderful panel today, and for allowing us to speak, me quite briefly, on the panel today.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, all my panelists, everybody. It's an honor for me to be able to facilitate this conversation. I also want to thank Max and Greg, our volunteer event producers who are working behind the scene to make sure that all the technical stuff go well so that we don't have to worry about this. So tomorrow's talk will be Women Leader in the Global Movement for Human Rights. Until next time, until the next talk that I'm moderating, I'm signing off.